Hello, everybody. Good morning. Um, Happy Environment Day from all of us at SLYCAN Trust, and welcome to the first of 4 webinars that we have organized today. For our first session, SLYCAN Trust, in partnership with Humane Society International, has invited Alokparna Sengupta to speak on the environmental cost of animal abuse. To briefly give you an introduction to Alok, she is the Managing Director of Humane Society International and Humane Society India. She has worked in the animal protection movement for close to a decade and has been a part of several government and scientific committees, including that of the Indian Council of Medical Research, CDSCO, Central Insecticides Board, Bureau of Indian Standards, to name a few. She has also been a part of several stakeholder committee meetings to bring animal-friendly policies to India. Before we start, while Alok turns on her camera and mic, just to let you know that if you have any questions for Alok during the session, please hold on to them. We will enable a Q&A mode following the presentation. Questions to be asked on social media, and we will direct them here. Thank you, Alok, and over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Senator. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak about this animal welfare special topic in not only my heart, but also Humane Society International India's. So just to introduce you, I'm Alokparna. I'm from Humane Society International India. We're an animal protection organization in India. And we are part of the world's largest animal protection group, which is also Humane Society International. Today, I'm just going to talk about the environment, like Senesha said, the environmental cost of animal cruelty. These are institutional cruelties and how we can mitigate those, and then I'll move on to talk about a little bit about the link between animal cruelty and human violence, and how we can prevent those things, or how we can recognize these connections in our own homes too. So, starting with, we all know that how the intensive animal agriculture has an effect on human environment. So over the past many years, there has been an exponential rise in meat consumption. Currently, 1/3 of the world's calories consumed come from animal products, and this is true for India too. The percentage of non-vegetarian consumption is increasing, but what a lot of us don't know is where our foods are actually being produced. So where our foods actually come from. These are some photographs that we have taken, and other partner organizations and animal welfare advocates have taken from working food production facilities or working poultry facilities. So this is actually just a glimpse of where our eggs come from, something as little and minute that one might say where our eggs come from. It's filled with 2 to 3 feet of feces, and honestly, in India, the workers in these farms do not have any protective gears, so they are inhaling, consuming the toxic substances that are being emitting in these farms, right? So according to the UN FAO, 33% of the world's land and water resources are consumed by intensive animal agriculture, and 14%, and animal agriculture contributes 14.5% to the greenhouse gas emissions. In South Asia, 1,507 tons of carbon dioxide and greenhouse gas emissions are emitted, and which include buffalo meat, milk, and it is not only limited to meat or eggs. It also talks about milk. So in India, for example, we like the US or in other countries, we definitely do not have beef ranches or cattle ranches where cattle are only raised for meat, but we are one of the world's largest milk producers and exporters, and we have a huge population of cattle, including cows and buffaloes, and these are the ones who grow old and then are exported for leather, or slaughtered for leather, slaughtered for their meat, and their meat is exported. Now, a lot of science and news media has been carrying this, and what is being said is that if you take the top 5 meat and dairy corporations, it will exceed the greenhouse emissions of companies such as Shell or BP, the petrochemical companies. So this has also only been in the news for the past 5 or 10 years. And before that, we did not think about the environmental effects of our food production systems. And when we say food production systems, it is very simplified. We don't realize that there are sentient beings who are in play, who are part of these systems, who are confined each and every single day, and whose presence also is contributing to the environmental burden on the planet. And so while we talk, these are numbers, 14.5%, so many tons, this, that, and the other. But and of course, in India, for example, we have 403 million egg-laying hens. So only for eggs, 403 egg-laying hens are present, who are confined in battery cages every single day of their lives for the 1 to 2 years of their lives that they egg production lives that they have. And but it is not only also about the kind of emissions that they produce, but also the kind of conditions that they live in. So while you saw that the 2 to 3 layers, 2 to 3 feet of feces that is there, these hens do not have, they live in conditions where their welfare is also impacted. So while the workers work through that feces and come in and collect eggs, imagine living in those squalid conditions for your entire life, and in conditions in cages where you don't even have space to put your feet on. So the natural behavior of these hens are to perch. So we often forget that hens, when we talk about chickens, we always think of the chicken on our plate. But these hens, they are birds. They like to perch on branches. They like to lay eggs in privacy in a nest box. They like to dust bathe to keep insects and flies and ticks away from their body. And but these egg-laying these battery cages that we are seeing on the screen, they do not allow any of the natural behaviors. So not only is it environmentally harmful, these intensive confinement systems, but it is also hurting these animals in more ways than we can imagine. Sometimes these cages will have dead animals inside, and these animals living next to each other. This photo that I show you, you can clearly see that the hen's beak has been chopped off and has been cut, and that has been not only so her beaks were chopped off when she was a chick, because when you keep these animals in such close confinement, they are cannibalistic in nature, so they will peck at each other. So instead of giving more space, the industry, what they have done is sought the of course more cruel method, but a less resource intensive method for them, which is to chop off their beaks. and their beaks are very important for them because they forage through their beaks. They find out their natural instinct is to forage through their beaks to figure out a pebble from a worm and things like that, and they have nerves on their beaks, and one can only imagine the kind of pain they must be going through as baby chicks when their beaks are cut off. Of course, they live in horrible conditions. I showed you a photo of the kind egg-laying hen production facility that they have, and they are always for 1 to 2 years of their lives while they produce eggs every single day. They live in slanting positions so that their feces falls on the floor. So here you can see, and the perch loving birds that we have, they are fully flattened on wire cages where their claws going through the cages. And there have been times when they are, again, after they stop giving eggs, they are removed for selling it as meat. And there have been times when their legs get stuck in these cages and they are just chopped off because the cages have to be cleared. We should not mistake these facilities for the ones that we eat for meat. That is a completely different ballgame altogether. And these are broiler chickens who live in while it may seem like they're not being caged and they are better off, they have a completely different system. They are much heavier in weight because they have been trait selected in a way that they put on 2 to 2.5 kgs of weight while they are only 39 to 48 days old. So essentially these animals are chicks right now. Researchers have shown that their voice is that of a chick. That means it is of a baby, but they look like full-grown animals because of the trait selection. The previous ones which I was showing you was that of eggs. So they are trait selected to be lean and to lay eggs every single day, 1 egg every single day. Which is also, it has been through the years because in nature they would lay about 18 to 20 eggs per year. Here they are laying 1 egg per day, which is 365 eggs per year. But why am I talking about this? Again, I'm talking because the way these animals are treated and the way these animals are then disposed causes not only an animal welfare problem, but also a health problem and environmental problem. You can see here that there are of course a lot of these animals, because their body cannot take, their bones cannot take the weight of their body, they cannot move, so they are here. And you can see this animal who's upturned. Nobody has bothered to set him right, and it's probably dead. And the disposal mechanisms are of this manner. So this is taken from a farm where on the side these dead animals have been disposed, have been just thrown away, and there are live animals who are still being fed and grown for meat. So, and do not mistake that these animals will be disposed and buried. These will also be sold to some less fortunate people so that they can get profit out of it. And of course, there is non-therapeutic use of antibiotics in broiler systems, in those systems where we grow poultry for our meat. And this is not limited to poultry or milk. I'm not showing you cattle photos here, but I'm concentrating on poultry and fish because cattle somehow, at least people have some sentiments towards. When you see they are considered animals. Chickens, hens, fish, they are not considered sentient beings at all. Another huge problem of animal welfare is fish welfare, is the cleaning up of or emptying up of our oceans. This is a photo from where the fishermen have come and they are selling it in wholesale for for sale, fish for sale. This, though this is an aquaculture farm, know that these animals are also emptied out from the ocean, and then some of them are grown in the aquaculture, some have continued to have mariculture. This is a video, but I'm not sure this will play right now. So I'm just going to move on. In the meanwhile, there are, of course, animal welfare issues, environmental issues. There are regulations, but one of the biggest problems of India, at least, are that most of these regulations are not followed through. The licenses are given, regulations are not followed. Some slaughterhouses, some farms also run without licenses. For some industry folks, there are not even regulations that they need to follow. So like you can see on your screen, there's just so much pollution, lack of accountability in slaughterhouses, in meat shops, in intensive animal agriculture farms, which are one of the causes of an enormous amount of environmental pollution. And this is not animal welfare people saying this, but the pollution control boards of our country, the National Green Tribunal, which is the environmental arm of the court, saying all this. And recently, slaughterhouse was fined 50 lakh rupees for causing pollution. And this is also because they are not following the regulations. They are not looking at the environmental regulations put for them, and they have been given a free rein to run and do whatever that they want to do. So here, not only is the environment impacted, but also the welfare of animals, because in regulation, you also have how to treat an animal to ensure that animals are not slaughtered in front of each other, which causes, if they are, it causes huge stress in animals. And there is, I don't think there are many, or maybe there would be 1 or 2 slaughterhouses in India where these are actually followed, because in most slaughterhouses, animals are blatantly killed in front of each other, causing huge amount of stress to the animals, which then impacts the health of the human beings who are eating these animals. Of course, why do I show you this is because it is related to the food that we are eating. And time and again, research has said that we need to change our food systems. We need to transform our diets and the way our food production is done to make it a little more planet friendly, more environment friendly. Animal agriculture, intensive animal agriculture, also contributes largely to ocean dead zones, because of which there is no oxygen in these places. From about 1960s, where there were a handful or 40 or 50 ocean dead zones, now in 2008, which is still, I mean, I'm sure it has increased now, there are 405 ocean dead zones in our ocean. So this is a intensive animal agriculture is a huge cause for these ocean dead zones. And trees are being, I mean, of course, because we need the kind of land we need to raise these animals, deforestation is taking place rampantly throughout the world. 1,600 trees are being cut down every minute to produce meat, so which is of course to produce these huge factory farms where animals can be raised for meat. Now, what is these are the impacts of intensive animal agriculture, and one of the ways we can contribute to reducing the environmental impact of animal agriculture is to try and reduce and replace the meat in our diets. While we would love for the world to become plant-based, but we know that it is not possible for everyone to shift immediately. But if you can, please try to cut down meat 1, 2, 3 days a week. For every week, try to cut down your meat and dairy consumption, meat, egg, and dairy consumption by one day a week. Then following week, try 2 days a week. Then try 3 days a week. we're not asking you to replace your turn vegan in a day, but please incrementally cut your meat, eggs, and dairy out of your planet, out of your diet, so that we can cut these horrible impact on the environment out of our planet too. Now, the other things, there are two other topics that I would like to speak about, and I'm seeing that I'm crossing my 20 minutes given to me, but I'll quickly go through it, is animal experimentation. Globally, right now, 126 million animals are used, vertebrate animals are used for animal testing, and these numbers are only from countries that actually produce this data. There are many countries around the world, including India, which do not mandate giving out numbers of how many animals you're using. And it is not a very well-known fact, but we don't know the environmental impact of animal experimentation in the world. A standard, any and all of the chemicals that are produced in the world are tested on animals. And there are so many produced around the world. And these are toxic, these are pollutants, pesticides, cosmetics, drugs, which have a variety of chemicals in them. A standard test can take about 10 to 12 years. For example, a pesticide takes about 10 years from discovery to market, and it takes about 10,000 animals for one pesticide. So imagine not only are you using that pesticide for spraying it around and causing toxicity in the environment, but also you're using up 10,000 and using 10,000 animals through the years. What all are involved in animal experimentation? Of course, you have animal carcasses, you have toxic substances which are being constantly tested, injected into animals, inhaled by animals, and tissues which need to be disposed of, animal carcasses that needs to be disposed of, needles, syringes, all that you see on the screen, cages, plasticware, huge amount of animal waste. However, the problem is that while welfare has been discussed upon, reduction, refinement, replacement, the 3 R's which were brought about by Russell and Birch in 1969, those have been discussed, but the environmental impact of animal experimentation is not recorded, neither asked for or researched. However, there is a silver lining. For example, the Environmental Protection Agency in the US has decided to end animal testing or phase out animal testing by 2035. So we have about 15 years now. The US has about 15 years now. And we have to see where our countries lie in animal testing and get the government and get these corporations to be more accountable, because not only are there more human relevant technologies available, but these can also be less environmentally impactful for the planet. The last thing that I'm going to touch upon is, of course, wildlife crimes. There is a lot of hunting, poaching, a lot of human-wildlife conflict that goes on, but I'm going to touch upon poaching and hunting, where again, institutionalized cruelty. In the past 40 years, 52% of our wildlife has been wiped out only due to poaching. And it is a huge billion-dollar industry. And one of the biggest victims of those are, for example, these pangolins. We have seen a hue and cry about tigers, elephants, and rightly so. But there are millions of other animals who are victims to these poaching and hunting incidents. And industry, I would not say incidents, but industry, because they are just like hens who do not evoke that emotion in us. And we are unable to humanize these animals at that point. But for example, these pangolins, they are anteaters. They contribute to the ecosystem of the planet. And like my colleague taught me a few days back, that while tigers, if a tiger is removed from place, there are 3 other species who can perform the same functions in the ecosystem, in the forest. But if a pangolin is removed from a place, there is no other species who can perform the same functions of the pangolin. Pangolins are now are protected species under the CITES. However, in India, where in South Asia, where they are found, they are still hunted and poached. And these are photos from where our team, along with the forest departments, have seized these animals. And just look at the one on the lower end where the scales have been removed and the animal is still actually breathing, but dying a very painful, slow death. So while, of course, poaching and hunting is an environmental issue because of the kind of demand of some sort of herbal traditional medicines that we have that are required, it is also a huge animal welfare issue and a conservation issue. And of course, there's a huge amount of human-wildlife conflict. Over the last 2 days, we've seen the news about an elephant dying in India, in the southern state of Kerala. And that is, while that is of course heartbreaking, but it is not uncommon. With the kind of deforestation that is occurring, with the kind of environmental clearances that are being given out, there is a growing conflict because we are growing as a population and the animals are there, and we are having to share a single resource. We are having to share resources, and that's why we're constantly in conflict with each other. And while some Western countries and other countries might be promoting trophy hunting as a solution to this conflict and as conservation, this only will drive these species down to extinction. We need to mitigate human-wildlife conflict. There needs to be concerted actions between different stakeholders to prevent these reactive measures of, for example, the first picture that you're seeing of killing of these animals and bait bombing these animals, or a vulgar display of killing of these animals. Because ultimately, look at the child watching behind. In the photo that the cat is there, look at the child watching behind. His family, his villagers being cruel to this animal and displaying it very heroically, right? And that is where I come to my last argument, that animals must not be left out of the equation. Animals must not be left out of the argument when we are talking about environment, when we are talking about food security, when we are talking about sustainable goals. And why do I say this? Is because of the 4 stages of cruelty, which clearly depicts what animal cruelty does on human minds and how it can be related to how it is related to human violence. So an English artist called William Hogarth in 1751 depicted a boy called Tom, a fictional character called Tom Nero, his life, and depicted animal cruelty in that sense. So in the first stage, you will see here that he's torturing a dog as a child, right? He's torturing a dog and he's having fun out of it. Then as a grown-up man, he goes on to beat bigger animals, animals who are greater in size. So here it is a horse. And in the third one, he ultimately moves on to robbery, rape, seduction, murder, and it goes from a small domesticated friendly animal to then human beings. And of course, the fourth stage says that he gets the reward of his cruelty, which is execution. But having said that, it is not only a depiction of an English author in the 18th century. The Federal Bureau of Investigation in the US, FBI, has now made animal cruelty a felony, and they track animal abuse animal abuse, so that they can find people where they can find homes where there is human violence too. So, for example, in the year 2000, there was a study where it said that 70% of people charged with cruelty to animals were known before to the police for their other violent behavior. In fact, take any serial killer you know, any serial murderer you know, and you will know that their first victims were either were definitely young animals, and then they moved on to young children, and then they moved on to women and other people. And 70% of, more than 70% of abused women said their partners harmed, killed, or threatened their pets. And this is one of the reasons why in many countries women are not able to get out of their abusive relationships, because they stay in the abusive relationships because of the pets, because the pets are also getting threatened. Abused animals were also found in 60% of homes where child abuse or neglect occurred. So it is not only important to it is not only important for knowing what can lead to human violence, but it is also important to recognize animal cruelty, because your violence is happening there and then. You can save a lot of lives if we recognize animal cruelty and give the value that it deserves. So the link between animal cruelty, family abuse, domestic violence is clear, because 26.8% of boys and 30% of girls were victims of physical and sexual violence and reported domestic violence, and have been reported to abuse family pet violence also. So animals are often used as the first layer of threat, saying that and it can be a symptom of what is to come. So, for example, a lot of the cases that we've seen, even in India, and these are, of course, US reports, because there are very few countries who actually do these researches, but there are a lot of reports which says that, and we've faced these cases where where there has been a dog rescued, and it comes from a family of domestic abuse, and the wife came and gave the pet to us, and said that the pet's sibling his head was smashed in the wall by the husband. She's running away with the husband right now. She was running away with the husband and did not want to report the husband because she was scared of the husband. So often animal abuse is the animal is threatened to show, okay, see what I can do to your animal, and then imagine what I do to you. So again, why I am showing this is to say that whether in your homes, whether individual cruelty or institutional cruelty, it has a great impact on mind. And as people, in our nature, it is to be compassionate towards animals. If you see a child, the first reaction of a child to an animal would be to go and touch the animal and to be friendly to the animal. Of course, it is the fear that we as parents put into the child's mind, that okay, it'll bark, or they'll bite you, don't go close to the animal. But when we accustom the child to seeing violence, for example, in that video where in the photo where the entire group of people were standing and the animal was being tortured, children see this and then they normalize it in their minds, and then not only does the violence levels in their homes, not only do we predispose them to violence in the future, but also when these people grow up to be people in the corporate, people in the regulatory affairs sector, they do not recognize the kind of violence that we met out to animals institutionally too. So that is why what I'm saying is that when we talk of environment, when we talk of sustainable development goals, when we talk of plant-based food, we must not forget that the animals' lives are also in pretty bad condition, and that while the land usage, while the water usage is very important, and the chemicals being seeped into the groundwater levels are important, the animals must not be taken out of the equation. And just want to end by saying a humane society starts with us, with you individually. So when we teach our children to be compassionate towards animals, see animals as their own beings who belong in the ecosystem. Because when we talk of nature, what does nature have? It has flora and fauna. So the fauna is something we need to protect, and that's how we'll build a bit more humane society. So I'm done for now. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. Sorry, I took around 40 minutes. I should have taken much lesser than that.
That's okay, Alok. That was actually very useful, insightful. And for those of you who don't know, as part of our work with HSI, we have a Meatless Monday program as well. So the Meatless Monday team on Mondays and on other days, we try to promote sustainable lifestyles, consumption, meat-free, vegan eating. You could check us out on Instagram, where in Sri Lanka, what we try to do is we try to introduce vegan and vegetarian restaurants, businesses, all on the sustainable angle. But yeah, so that was very insightful. We will open up for questions now. Right. So the questions have been opened up. If anyone has any questions, please do write it on the chat. For those joining us on Facebook, please be good enough to put the questions on the comments there. We will direct them here. Thank you.
Okay, so the question is: has the COVID-19 lockdown measures caused an increase in poaching and human-animal conflict in India? How's the situation with stray dogs and other street animals? I do not know if we have an answer for that for human-animal conflict in India. I think with the current lockdown, there might be we are hoping that the poaching thing has gone down because nobody has been allowed to go out, but that is only limited to March and April, and not now, because India is opening up now. With human animal conflict, unfortunately, that has been a steady that has remained constant, because it is a matter of livelihoods for both for the people, the humans who are in conflict, and a matter of their life for the animals who are in conflict. Animals do not know when there is a lockdown and when there is none. However, we have seen videos and photos of animals moving around freely, and but that those are just a handful which come in front of us. So while I don't know, I can't answer that about poaching. Human animal conflict, I don't think there has been a reduction. There has probably been reduction in reporting because humans are inside their houses, but that the trend will increase once we are up and about again, and which is right about now. With respect to street animals, street dogs, I think in the first few weeks, there was not much worry because our street animals are quite sturdy, and most street animals are quite sturdy. With the lockdown increased, after the first 3 weeks, for every 2 weeks, and it has now gone on for about 2.5-3 months. The problem has been that the restaurants and a lot of shops and commercial places have closed up, and because there are no people allowed there either, and food waste has reduced from restaurants. People are not who work in commercial places were not working. That's why a lot of organizations in India were feeding animals. Of course, HSI India, Humane Society International India, has also fed animals over the past 2 months. So from April, mid-April to May 31st, we've been feeding, and we've covered, I think, 18,000 animals per day over across 10 cities. And there are many individuals, institutions, organizations such as ours, and even the police and the administration who have been helping this. But I would like to point out that we've always asked for responsible feeding so that these animals don't completely depend on us when the situation is hopefully back to normal sometime, and that we should not let them become completely dependent on us. So responsible feeding is very important. So and during the months of summer, keeping a water bowl trough is most important. From Facebook, can you speak briefly about the consumption relationship between poverty, nutrition, and sustainable food consumption? I think one of the biggest problems of animal agriculture, intensive animal agriculture, is that the industry talks about food security, to reaching out to the people who need the food, and giving it to them. Unfortunately, in India and I would say most of the country, most of the world, this has not been the case. The inequitable distribution of food has been so blatantly visible, is that the people who need it. So, for example, rural India, for example, still only consumes 5 eggs per annum, and I'm talking about the egg industry. They still consume 5 eggs per annum, while 5 to I think 12 eggs per annum. While urban India, which already has enough resources and more, they consume around 180 eggs per annum. So that is the average. So imagine, so obviously, when the egg industry says that, oh, we are looking out for the people who don't have it, that is actually not true, because the eggs are not getting distributed to the people that really need it. Especially a lot of midday meal schools. So a lot of our marginalized people study in government schools, where they are provided midday meals, so that there is a incentive to come to school and learn and educate yourself under the Right to Education Act. So they are provided midday meal schools, and where there are eggs provided, the worst quality of the eggs are sent there. A lot of the kids have died because of food poisoning, because rotten eggs are being sent there. So while there might be a notion that if we produce more food, a lot of people will get it and the people who need it will get it, that has not been true. However, for example, there are backyard farmers. The government of India and the UNDP have brought out a lot of schemes where a family has been given 100,000 rupees, and in return has been given 100,000 rupees to set up a backyard farm where they will produce where they will be given chicks. They will raise those hens. The eggs will be eggs can be used for the family and for the village or the locality that the farmers are from. That has been useful, and that is something where those conditions there, the animals are also kept well, they are treated very well, and the food sovereignty is there, where the families are responsible for their own food, and they are self-sufficient, and the extra eggs then produced are given out and are sold. So it generates an income for the family, it generates food for the family, and the animals are treated well. So it's a win-win situation for all. So these are the things that you need to focus on, where the people who really need it can generate their own livelihoods and can be fed, and the environment is not cost. The cost on the environment is also lesser. I hope that this thing's your question. Okay, so Vasida asks, could you please share with us whether and how plant-based diets are taken into consideration when developing climate policies in India? Is this seen as an option providing plant-based protein? or enhancing the production of this is to provide in a way that there is no threat to food security. Unfortunately, there is no policy on plant-based diets in India at all. It is not being talked about. Uh, we know that India is seen as a very vegetarian country. I think about 10 years back, we were 42% vegetarians. Now we are 38% vegetarians, but we often fail to see that 38% and 42% are much less than half, and so that still means that 72% people are non-vegetarians. While the plant-based movement is growing and the plant-based startup sector is also growing, unfortunately, plant-based diets are not taken into consideration when developing climate policies. The only thing that is taken into consideration is livelihoods, is giving them basic necessities for the people. And yeah. uh, One of the reasons for promoting plant-based diet and promoting plant-based startups is also, and working with for example, the food processing in ministry, is to ensure that the cost of plant-based food, there is a bad reputation of plant-based food that it is very extremely expensive, and we want to drive down that cost of existing plant-based food to ensure, and human products, for example, with a little bit of products which have more animal welfare than the intensive confinement ones, so that it is easily accessible and it is available for people who need it. So unfortunately, policies are not do not take into consideration plant-based food.
We have one more question that we can accommodate, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. How does the environmental impact of vegetable and fruit agriculture compare to animal breeding? Animal agriculture is way more impactful on, has impact on the environment than fruit and vegetable agriculture. So while of course the crop farming has its own issues, but nothing compared to the animal ones, because when you talk about animal agriculture, you're talking about deforestation, which is common to probably crop farming, but you're talking about at least 50,000 animals, raising those animals, processing their excreta, their urine, their feces, feeding them the GHG emissions that they have, uh, and then removing their carcasses, disposal of their carcasses after they are slaughtered and more. So this has a lot more impact than crop farming for sure. So I'm not the best person to let you know about the data between and the comparison, but the impact. Otherwise, the UN would also not ask us to eat plant-based for a healthier planet, because animal agriculture does. I mean, it's 14.5% of GHG emissions, so it is a hefty cost to the planet for sure.
Alok, before we close, I mean, I also just want to know, so the elements you highlighted, how are they introduced as ethical guidelines for food, like for production? I mean, is there like a policy on sustainable food consumption and production? And if the messaging is part of the ethical guidelines on animal products and organic food, would you like to speak on that a bit?
Yeah. So I think many times we mistake organic food to, at least organic milk or organic meat, to more humane meat, or animal, or meat which has animal welfare in place, welfare regulations in place. Unfortunately, that is not the truth. While organic food has gained the reputation of being very positive, which for all the organic food, most of the organic vegetables and fruits, it is definitely a better choice. But a lot of the corporates now use this as a marketing gimmick to say organic and say that our animals are, oh, you have organic milk. But when you go to the farms, it is the same amount of production systems, it's the same amount of confinement systems that you will find. With respect to the second question was about how plant-based food has been, how we are working with policymakers on plant-based food, ethical guidelines.
Ethical guidelines, yes.
Yeah. So while working with policymakers, there are two ways, of course. So one is that we talk about the welfare conditions of these animals, and of course, then we talk about the impact of the farms on the environment. So like you saw in the presentation, we there have been many people who have been going to court who for shutting down these slaughterhouses, and this is not animal protection activists or anybody else, it's the people who live around the surroundings. We've had so many complaints coming to us for fly infestation around battery caged farms. Now when we go to policymakers, it is a mix of we work with the corporates also, and unfortunately in the farm animal protection sector we've had little success, in the sense that we've been able to ban, for example, work with the government to ban forced molting. Forced molting is a time when egg-laying hens are starved for 14 days so that they don't so that they molt away, that their feathers molt away, and so they do it because they don't, during the molting season the hens stop giving eggs, so the entire farm used to be force molted so that all of them have their molting season at once. So these are the times we've been able to use the animal welfare argument and curb these practices. However, these things are still in the process. So in fact, giving space, giving opportunity for movement, while it is written down in a Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, it is not implemented. So for example, the battery cage case, it is in the High Court right now, and it is on the basis of animal welfare. So hopefully we will get a guideline and a regulation soon based on animal welfare. For wildlife protection and for animal testing, I think animal testing, the science has been there for a long time. So if in 1969 scientists came up with the 3R policy, it has been there. Scientists definitely know about it, and they're the most knowledgeable people on the planet to know about these things. However, awareness amongst the entire community has been less. Having said that, regulators and scientists have been very open to it, and where possible, guidelines on the use of animals, on the judicious use of animals, where possible, remove them. The 3R policy has been of immense help. Having also, right now, I think we are in the technology age. It is time to get rid of the refined, because the refinement in the animal testing sector, if you want to get good results, and if you want to use animals, you have to take care of the animals. But we should now think about completely replacing animal testing. So I think there are few places where you can talk about ethical you can talk about animal welfare and bring out ethical guidelines or policies, and there are few places where we are still struggling. So farm animal sector, while it is hugely impacting the environment, the policy is still in the works, because it is a huge industry and a very powerful industry. A long answer to a very short question is that animals, there are some places where we can use the animal welfare in setting up the ethical guidelines, and there are some places where we are still struggling.
Thank you, Alok, and thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everyone, for joining and engaging with us today. And on behalf of SLYCAN Trust, Alok, thank you. I mean, it took more than what we planned, but I think it was a very useful discussion. For those of you who have more questions, please drop them on Facebook or on the chat. I will get them, go to Alok and send them back to you. As I mentioned earlier, Humane Society International is one of our partner organizations, and we work with them in relation to our work with on Meatless Monday, animal welfare, and sustainable food consumption and production. Thank you.
Thank you so much, SLYCAN Trust.
Bye.
Bye-bye.